I want to tell you something that still embarrasses me a little because it wasn't a big moment. It wasn't a movie moment. It happened over a phone bill. Every month, my roommate Theo and I split our expenses down to the cent using this app that reminds you, very cheerfully, that you owe someone $11.43. I was sitting on the kitchen counter one Tuesday night, typing in the numbers, and I got to the part where you write a note for what the charge was for. And without even thinking about it, I typed for the phone case you dropped and broke, you clumsy idiot. And I hit send before I even registered that I had used the word you like I'd known him for a decade, like the words came out soft instead of annoyed. He read it from across the room, laughed way too hard and said, "Wow, rude." And I laughed too, but something in my chest did this weird little flip like when you miss a stare in the dark. I didn't know what it meant yet. I just filed it away as one of those strange little nothing moments you have with a person you live with. That's the thing nobody tells you about falling for your roommate. It doesn't happen in one dramatic scene. It happens in 100 boring ones, stacked so close together that by the time you notice, you're already standing in the middle of it and there's no clean way to explain how you got there. Theo and I had been living together for almost a year at that point. We met through a mutual friend who needed someone to sublet a room quickly, and I remember being nervous about it, because I'd heard horror stories about roommates who left dishes in the sink for 3 weeks or who stole your snacks and lied about it. Theo was none of that. Theo left little sticky notes on the fridge that said things like, "Ate your leftover pad thai. I owe you a pad thai, I'm sorry, I have no self-control." He apologized for things that didn't need apologizing for. He hummed while he made coffee, always slightly off-key, always the same 3 songs on rotation. I didn't think of him as anything other than a good roommate for a long time. He dated a guy named Marcus for about 4 months that year, and I remember being fine with it, genuinely fine, cheering him on even, telling him Marcus seemed decent when he asked. I wasn't lying, I meant it. I didn't feel anything close to jealousy, not that I noticed anyway. It was only afterward, looking back with the benefit of knowing what I know now, that I could see the little cracks. Like how I used to make an excuse to still be up when Theo got back from dates with Marcus, telling myself I just wasn't tired yet. Like how I'd ask too casually, "How'd it go?" and feel this quiet relief when the answer was it was fine, nothing special, instead of dread that I couldn't name. Anyway, Marcus and Theo broke up in the spring, over something small that mattered more than it should have. Theo said Marcus never remembered which stories he'd already told him, kept asking the same questions like Theo was a stranger every time. "It's exhausting," Theo told me one night, sitting on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets because the couch was covered in laundry we hadn't folded yet. Being with someone who doesn't actually listen, you know. I sat down next to him on the floor because it felt rude not to. "I know," I said, even though I wasn't sure I did know, not really, not from experience. But I wanted to know, I wanted him to keep talking. We ended up staying on that kitchen floor until almost 2 a.m., him talking about Marcus, then not talking about Marcus at all, just talking about his mom's garden and a trip he took to Portugal when he was 19, and how he almost became a marine biologist before he got seasick on a research boat and rethought his whole life plan. I laughed so hard at that story I had to put my head down on my knees. And when I looked up, he was watching me laugh, not laughing himself, just watching, with this expression I couldn't read. Soft, maybe, a little surprised, like he'd noticed something too. "What?" I said. "Nothing," he said and looked away first. "You have a good laugh, that's all." I didn't know what to do with that sentence. I still don't, fully. But I remember it kept me awake that night, replaying in my head like a song stuck in a loop, and I told myself it didn't mean anything because I needed it not to mean anything. Because if it meant something, I'd have to actually deal with it, and I was not, at that point in my life, someone who dealt with things. I avoided things. I was extremely good at pretending I hadn't noticed my own feelings until they became impossible to ignore, like a smoke alarm that only goes off once the whole kitchen's on fire. So I did what I always do. I pretended the moment on the kitchen floor didn't happen. I went back to normal, or what I told myself was normal, making him coffee some mornings if I was up first, him doing the same for me. Watching bad reality TV together on Sunday nights, the kind where you both pretend to hate it while being completely invested in whether some stranger gets a rose or gets sent home. Small stuff, roommate stuff, nothing stuff, except it stopped feeling like nothing. The part where everything actually cracked open happened almost by accident, 3 months later at the worst possible time, in the worst possible way, which feels about right, honestly, because nothing about real feelings ever arrives when you're prepared for it. My dad had a health scare, nothing life-threatening in the end, but I didn't know that yet when I got the call. I was at work, and my mom's voice on the phone was doing that thing where it's too calm, too controlled, the way people talk when they're trying not to fall apart in front of you. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember much of that day except standing in our apartment doorway with my keys still in my hand, not able to make myself walk further into the room, like if I stood still long enough none of it would be real. Theo came out of his room because he heard the door. He took one look at my face and didn't ask what was wrong. He just walked over and put his hand on my arm and said, Hey, I'm here, what do you need? Not, are you okay? Which people ask when they want you to say yes so they don't have to deal with the answer. He asked what I needed. Nobody had asked me that in years, maybe ever, and I didn't even have an answer because I didn't know what I needed. I just knew I didn't want to be alone in that apartment with my thoughts. I don't know, I said, and my voice cracked in a way that embarrassed me. Okay, he said, then let's not figure it out standing in the doorway. He got me to the couch. He didn't say a bunch of comforting things that didn't mean anything, didn't tell me it would all be fine because he didn't know that yet either. He just sat next to me, close, his knee touching mine. Let me talk when I wanted to talk and stay quiet when I didn't. At some point I started crying, the ugly kind, the kind you can't really control once it starts, and he didn't flinch or get awkward about it the way some people do. He just put his arm around me and let me lean into him, and I remember feeling his heartbeat against my shoulder, steady, and thinking absurdly in the middle of one of the scariest days of my life, I feel safe right now. Actually safe. Like nothing bad can touch me while I'm sitting here. That thought terrified me more than the phone call had. Because safety isn't a feeling you're supposed to get from your roommate. Safe is a feeling you get from family, from someone you've built a life with, not from the guy who eats your leftovers and leaves you passive-aggressive notes about doing the dishes. And I sat there crying into his shoulder, and somewhere underneath the fear about my dad, this other realization started forming, slow and unwelcome, like ice cracking under weight you didn't know was there. I liked him, not roommate liked him, I actually liked him, had probably liked him for a while. My dad turned out to be okay, they caught it early, he needed a procedure but nothing catastrophic, and I want to be honest, the relief of that should have been the biggest thing on my mind for weeks afterward. And it was, mostly. But underneath it, quietly, insistently, there was this other thing now that I couldn't unknown. I'd try to watch TV with Theo like we always did, and instead of paying attention to the show, I'd be paying attention to the way his hand rested on the couch cushion between us, wondering what would happen if I just moved my hand 2 inches to the left. I never moved my hand, I want to be clear about that. For weeks, I did nothing except quietly lose my mind a little in private at 1 a.m., staring at my ceiling, running through every conversation we'd ever had looking for evidence, like a detective building a case against my own heart. The thing that finally forced it into the open wasn't romantic at all. It was an argument about the thermostat of all things. It was late July, brutally hot, and Theo kept turning the AC down to what I considered an unreasonable ice age temperature, and I kept nudging it back up. And this went back and forth for about a week until one night I came home and it was freezing in the apartment again and something in me just snapped. In this small petty way that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with 3 months of unspoken feelings I didn't know how to carry anymore. Can you please stop touching the thermostat? I said, more sharply than the situation called for. Theo looked up from his laptop, surprised. It's like 90 degrees outside. I know what temperature it is outside, Theo, I have a phone. Okay, he said slowly, setting the laptop down. What's actually going on? Nothing's going on, I just don't want to freeze in my own apartment. That's not what this is, he said, and he wasn't being combative about it, he just said it plainly like a fact he was pointing out. You've been weird for weeks. Quiet weird, what's up? I should have lied. I had about 4 different lies loaded and ready to go. Instead, standing in our kitchen with the AC humming too loud and my heart doing something violent in my chest, I said, I think I have feelings for you. And I don't know what to do with that, and I'm sorry, and please don't make this weird, and honestly forget I said anything. Hey, he said, cutting me off, and he wasn't laughing, wasn't recoiling, wasn't doing any of the things my brain had spent weeks preparing for. He just looked at me for a long moment like he was double-checking he'd heard me right, and then he said quietly, I've known for like 2 months. I blinked. What? I've known, he said again. I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to make it weird or push you into something you weren't ready for, or I don't know, I kept telling myself I was imagining it. But then you'd do stuff like the way you'd get quiet whenever I talked about dating anyone, or how you'd remember exactly how I take my coffee without me ever telling you twice. I noticed, I just didn't know if you had. You never said anything, I said, and it came out almost accusatory, though I didn't mean it that way. Neither did you, he said, and there was a small smile pulling at the corner of his mouth now, nervous, hopeful. We're both idiots, apparently. I laughed, this shaky, relieved laugh, and something in my chest that had been clenched tight for months finally loosened. So what now? He walked closer slowly like he wasn't fully sure he was allowed to and said, "Now I guess we stop pretending, if you want to." "I want to," I said before I could second guess it, before the part of my brain that avoided things could talk me out of it. He reached out and took my hand, just held it, nothing dramatic, and said, "Okay, then can we please agree on a thermostat temperature because I genuinely think this could end us before we even start." I laughed so hard I had to lean on the counter, and he was laughing too, and it was this ridiculous, imperfect, very unromantic moment to become the moment everything changed, but it was ours and it was real and it didn't feel like a movie at all. It felt like actual life, messy and a little awkward and completely, overwhelmingly good. We didn't kiss that night, if you're wondering. It took another few days actually because we were both weirdly shy about it once it was real, once there was no more pretending to hide behind. We just sat on the couch that night, closer than we used to sit, his hand still holding mine, neither of us saying much, both of us grinning like idiots at nothing in particular. It felt like the beginning of something, not the whole story, just the door opening onto it. The kiss happened 4 days later in the kitchen again, funnily enough, like the kitchen had some sort of claim on our whole relationship before it even started. I was making coffee, he was standing too close, reaching past me for a mug he definitely could have asked me to hand him, and when I turned around we were suddenly a lot closer than either of us expected and neither of us moved away. "Hi," he said quietly like it was a question. "Hi," I said back. And then he kissed me, soft and a little uncertain, like he was still checking it was really okay, and I kissed him back and the coffee maker beeped behind us, completely ignored because for the first time in months, my brain wasn't racing ahead trying to figure anything out. It was just there in that kitchen with him and that was enough. I won't pretend everything after that was easy. Telling our families took time, his parents were wonderful about it almost immediately, mine needed a little more time to adjust, which was its own hard, quiet process. I don't think I need to walk you through here. We had arguments, real ones, not thermostat ones, about things like how much space we each needed, how our old roommate habits didn't always translate cleanly into relationship habits, how it's a strange thing to suddenly be dating the person whose dirty socks you've been silently judging for a year. But we figured it out mostly by talking, actually talking, the way he'd talked to me on that kitchen floor the night Marcus and him ended things, except now it was us, building something instead of processing an ending. Here's the part I think about most though, the part that still gets me a little even now. About 6 months into dating, we were lying in bed one night, not doing anything special, just talking in the dark the way you do when you're comfortable enough with someone that silence and conversations start to blur together. And I asked him, half joking, "When do you think it actually started, for you, I mean?" He was quiet for a second, thinking, "Honestly, I think it was the phone bill." I turned to look at him in the dark. "What phone bill?" "The one where you called me a clumsy idiot in the notes section," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice even though I couldn't fully see it. "It wasn't romantic, it wasn't anything, but it felt like you not roommate, you being careful and polite. It felt like you'd let your guard down without noticing, and I remember lying in bed that night thinking, oh no, I like him." I laughed, quiet into the dark. That's exactly when it happened for me too. I didn't understand it yet, but that's when it started. It's strange thinking back on it now that something as small and dumb as a shared expense app could be the actual beginning of my whole life changing. Not the kitchen floor, not the day my dad got sick, not even the thermostat fight. All of those mattered, all of those were part of it, but the real beginning was smaller than all of that, quieter, easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention, which I think is how most real love actually starts, not with fireworks. With small, ordinary honesty sneaking in sideways before you're ready for it, before you even notice it's already happened. We still split the bills the same way, by the way. I still leave notes calling him a clumsy idiot when he breaks things, which happens more often than either of us would like to admit. He still hums off-key while he makes coffee. Nothing about our daily life looks that different from before if you were just watching from the outside. Same apartment, same bad reality TV on Sunday nights, same arguments about the thermostat, which we still somehow have not resolved. But everything is different underneath all of it. And I think that's the part that gets me the most, even now when I tell this story. That falling for someone doesn't always look like falling. Sometimes it looks exactly like your regular life, going on exactly the same as always, until one day you look at it a little closer and realize it was never just your regular life at all. It was the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to you, wearing an ordinary disguise, waiting patiently for you to finally notice. And I almost didn't. That's the part that still keeps me up sometimes, thinking about how close I came to never saying anything, to letting the moment pass, to convincing myself it was nothing, over and over until it was too late to say it at all. I got lucky. He was patient enough and brave enough to let the truth sit there quietly until I was finally ready to see it too. If there's anything I'd want you to take from this, it's that: pay attention to the small moments. The phone bill moments, the kitchen floor moments. They might be trying to tell you something long before you're ready to hear it.